Hey everybody, I'm the Iron Sun, and I'm here with Carmen Studer, my guest, and we're going to talk about the planned obsolescence of the sexes, and we're just going to have a general conversation about it. Uh, so, Carmen, I wanted to start out by saying thank you for coming on. This is like
Of course.
really cool. It's kind of like really cool that this is happening. Um, it's kind of nuts how I was like watching your videos and listening, like, wow, awesome. And now I'm kind of making content as well. Like, I couldn't have imagined it. I think there were probably several content creators similar to you who said a lot of people, like, what's his name? Patriot Street Fighter.
Hmm.
So he said we need some other little guys to go make a channel.
Yeah,
If their channel's not big, and my channel's not big at all. But like he's like, just go make channels and just go say what you need to say anything. And I was like, okay, cool. So I said what I needed to say. He actually came to an event in the Dallas Metroplex area, and I
hmm,
went there to visit him, and I told him about my channel, and I met like a whole bunch of people. It was like the coolest thing ever.
it's so fun. Well, we're finding our people.
Yeah.
It's all of us who we just keep knocking on doors. And I can relate because I didn't even want to start one, but then was working with Michael Jaco, and then all of a sudden I had 300 followers on an account that was just sitting there, and he kept saying you should do one, and so finally I was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And he and Jesse's a boater, and Hotep Jesus
Their
and
content is really
Barrington Martin, some really cool people have agreed to come on mine when I only had 3,000 people. I even had a gentleman who's got, I think, 300,000 willing. We haven't scheduled yet, but he's going to do it. And I'm a big believer in connecting with people on the heart level rather than so much on, like we were talking about before we got on about credentials.
yeah.
And so if I feel led to send something out to somebody, invite them, they come, great. And if they don't, then I just go, okay, God didn't want that. So I don't get butthurt. I just enjoy the people that God does. And so far I haven't said no to anyone, except when I was like crazy busy in the winter, because I slowed down a little bit in the summer because people they travel.
Mm-hmm. Did we lose her? Carmen, can you hear me? Come on. Here, I'm gonna take you out and put you back in. Hopefully that'll fix it. We're having some technical issues. We'll get her back on in a second. If you can hear me, you can try leaving and coming back in. I checked my connection. It doesn't look bad on my end. So while she's gone, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, I think, is going to be super cool. And of course, we'll have perspective on two different sides. So I'm a millennial man, and she's a little bit older. She has a son my age, and a lot of the topics I'm going to go into kind of goes into what typically the kind of topics that she talks about. So we'll see what happens. Um, so while she's gone, I'm going to cover some topics that. Uh, so I have an excerpt called "The Issue of Men and Women." It talks about pretty much a comprehensive take on what's going on with men and women. And then I have a little bit more that goes into some things like male needs, female needs, stuff like that, shaming language on both sides, and solutions to a lot of the issues that are going on. between the sexes. Let's see what happens. So I'm just waiting for my guess once again. Let me check my email. So I just got some information. So she's doing a reboot right now of her computer. This is going to be a really good stream. I can already tell, and I'm really happy for it. Hopefully, I think the goal of this is to have a little bit more clarity on both sides as to what's going on, and to provide really simple solutions, like ideas as to what we can do to kind of fix a lot of the issues between the sexes. And the hope is also that for people who come back and watch this after the fact, that the information will kind of be comprehensive, but it'll also be structured in a way that makes sense. Again, this is going to be a good conversation. Let me see if I can find a funny video while she's gone. Let's see. I don't know. Hey, you're back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so sorry about that. Were you live?
Yeah, I'm live. I was just talking them all through it. It's fine.
Okay.
I was just letting them know where our conversation is going to go.
Okay, perfect.
There are technical issues.
I am so sorry. I literally, I don't know if you noticed me scooting up, and when I scooted up, I literally pulled the cord out of.
Did you pull out your Ethernet cord?
My whole everything.
Oh.
Yeah. So I apologize.
Good.
So I'm back. But yes, I understand what you're saying, and I do try as much as I can to. I think it's so important right now to be with like-minded people, regardless of what that kind is. That it's awesome. I'm also a big believer in reaching out to different ages. I think that people don't do enough of that. There's people, especially my age, they have it all together. They don't really need to, sometimes have a mentor or have somebody that they're mentoring. Yeah.
I think mentors are extremely important, and I can agree with you there. I wanted to say earlier, you said that you thrive, or you said that you just like going by ear. Mm-hmm. So it seems like you strive in chaos.
It's interesting because I have a lot of different philosophies about it, but my mom got cancer when I was 14. And when you realize that the most important person in your life is dying, you begin conditioning yourself. And it had a lot of really amazing side effects. Even though I lost her, there was, these silver linings that were just beautiful. And one of them was, I wanted to swim around in mother energy still. So I have always mentored, and I loved babysitting when I was younger, and really love younger people. I just have a fun time with them. But I also have, a woman that's older than me that's mentoring me, and kind of like my religious advisor, so to speak. And I have several really good friends that I, communicate with of all ages. I ask my daughter for advice all the time, and she's 24.
That's really cool
Thank you.
when the older, I think when the older individuals can actually ask and seek wisdom from people of all ages, that's that's really awesome. Like, I have a younger brother, I get a lot of wisdom from him, even though he looks up to me in a lot of ways, but like,
Yeah.
I actually look to him for a lot of different things. he's he's a little bit, he's very logical, similar to me, but my logic, the way I think, sometimes I wrap it in chaos. But then he's a little bit more grounded in that, um, but in a different way. So there's a lot of things that I don't recognize until I ask and try to pull certain ideas from him, and then
Right.
I get it. But then you have a lot of some people, they, kind of like what a lot of our politicians are doing right now, or a lot of administrators, people in high positions are doing right now. They kind of use that ethos as a way to make themselves seem more superior, and so they can't be questioned. They can't they can't ask for answers to other people,
Right.
and as you know, it kind of creates a lot of issues.
Yeah. Yep. It's really cool. Like I'm just trying to think, like, there's so many things that I have to say because my mind went a million different directions. But probably the main one that really popped out to me when you were talking about that is people will always say, the younger that people this, and they tend to complain every time. And I look at them and I say, do you know, I have never gone to a car dealership and said, can you get me an older car, please, older than the one I'm driving. Why don't I want that car? And the reason I don't want the older car, now, don't get me wrong, there's vintage cars that are great and people have fun with
Yeah.
them. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the average person. You want the newer, hybrid, amazing, right? Our children come here to teach us. They're the answer to our prayer. And we mold them into our stupid, here's the old, I want you to be an old car. I want you to run like this old car. I want you to do this old thing. I want you to, and they're not realizing that what is within a child, God placed there to unfold. It cannot unfold unless you let it. And
Mhm.
so giving a child freedom, listening. I have all of my moms that I work with on my charity. I have them sitting at the feet of their kids and listening closely because they have to be able to recognize and help nurture their gifts so that the world can become a better place.
Yeah.
I
I
think
think
I'm up closer to God than we are.
I think I kind of want to agree with you with your point that you were saying about supporting children, especially the mothers, kind of pouring that nurturing into children. There's a lot of that isn't really around nowadays. That kind
Mhm.
of feminine nurturing spirit, which um, for children is especially men like the little boys. That I think that's extremely important because a lot of the men who end up, fighting in wars and doing very dangerous things and harrowing things,
Mhm.
uh, I'd imagine that a lot of them think very fondly of their mothers or their aunts or their sisters during those really terrible moments. And even with daughters, a lot of things that happen in life that are very difficult to deal with, the mothers, and I'm specifically saying the mothers, kind of have a very important impact.
Mhm.
Sorry, I got to get my dog and make sure he's not attacking.
No worries. I'll keep talking too.
Hold
And
on.
that was one of the things that I absolutely loved about both my interviews with Hotep Jesus and Barrington Martin, because Barrington talks about not only just his parents being an influence on him, but his grandparents and his grandmothers in particular. And he talks about how he still talks to his grandmothers, that his grandmothers, each one of them, he talks to at least once a week. And that's huge. And then Hotep Jesus was telling me that his parents he had amazing parents, both. So when you have that nurturing, you just get more tools.
Yeah. A lot of kind of straight into the topic that I propose. A lot of men are criticized for not showing emotion, and the lack of emotional depth in men is something that a lot of, I would say, mothers kind of nurture that aspect of a lot of males' development earlier on.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. My son's going to be best man in one of his friends' weddings, and he was practicing his speech, and you can tell the influence of even his mother on him, which ended up being a funny situation for Dane because his friend was so nurturing when he split his head open when he was younger. And so he was going to tell a story about how all of his other friends were like, oh, well, call somebody, and he was like, are you kidding me? Give me your car. I got to take him to the, and he's just got this very nurturing, loving, attitude because that's what his mom was. His mom was a nurse, and so we do hand down those spirits.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, I kind of wanted to get to more of the darker aspects of things.
Yeah,
Just
that's cool.
kind of highlight it. So, on the same topic, a lot of males, there's a lot of, so with the emotion, I've noticed that a lot of females crave male emotional expression, but then there's certain factors that kind of make it difficult for a man to express his emotions. Mm-hmm. One of those things that I've found is that I don't know if a lot of guys have experienced this, but I think many men have experienced that whenever they show certain depths of emotion, a lot of women can't handle it. Like, like it'll freak them out, and in many cases, the woman will either lose all attraction to the guy all at once, and then the guy kind of learns, okay, that's not a good thing to do. Can't can't show that much of that energy to it, at least that particular kind of woman, because I've thought about this a lot of times, and I haven't really developed the full answer, but I was thinking, is it that some of the women don't have fathers in their lives? Because I mean, with fathers, you're going to see the young girls. I'd imagine they're going to see their fathers when they're at a low point, when they're expressing that side of themselves. And I think a lot of women, especially in the West, either are absent from their fathers or are fractured from that relationship in some way. And I think that makes it difficult for men in my generation.
Yeah, that would for sure. What I'm going to say sounds hopeless, but it's not. Can change. I changed myself in 8 weeks. The average person does not know what love is, and they have a thing called codependency, and they have attachment problems, and they have reciprocal issues. Like it has to be reciprocal, and it has to be a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening is, I think we're all realizing, anyone that's interested in relationships, unless they're really strong in their own power and authority, and they happen to find somebody who's also very sovereign, they're going to enter into conditional love. And conditional love is a broken model because there's nobody that could ever hit all the conditions. And so no matter how many you hit, that person will go, boom, you didn't hit that one. So then you try and you do better in that one, and then you get it, and then boom, they're mad at the next thing. So what's going to happen is whoever is demanding the conditions,
Hmm.
that person is going to get elevated worse and worse each time. So they're basically moving the envelope so that the finish line can never be achieved
Oh,
on
I
a
see.
broken model. You see what I'm saying? And
There's a lot
so
of that going around right now. Because you have, I mean, you have different standards for the sexes. I've noticed. I mean, with men, it's okay. How much socioeconomic status do you have? Like, how great are you in your stature physically? Like, are you taller than me?
yeah,
Kind of. And then the men have standards on women. Like, okay, how physically attractive are you? How feminine are you? How this? How that? Um, I think a lot of here's the thing. I don't necessarily disagree with the preference. I think the preference has to be reasonable. you know, like like it's okay to say, well, she has to, he has to draw air. He has to breathe in air and breathe it out. So he has to be alive. Um, Women, I've noticed they tend to like guys. Just the average woman, I've noticed they tend to be like physically attracted to guys that are taller than them.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's just one metric, but that I wouldn't say that that's insane. Where it gets insane is where you ask the average woman who's like 5'2", and she says the guy I'm attracted to has to be at least 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's like, what? That's
yeah,
like 14% of the population. Uh,
right.
yeah.
I'm here's what my goal always, and with all my clients, is to get them to, like Christ, um, overcome the world. So, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that all of those fleshly conditions at some level of connection to truth go away. How do I know this? Because I've seen a man with no arms and no legs have the most beautiful wife anyone could imagine, and children, and it's mind blowing, right?
Yeah.
He's not tall. He can't pick you up. He can't carry you. He can't cook for you. He can't, and you could go on and on. He is a spiritual dynamo. And so people underestimate where their true power is. Their true power is doing things from a state of flowing with the creator. And people call it flow state, people call it the zone. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but it's a feeling. It is not a doing. And so once we get enough people to be sovereign and have overcome the world, which means you've overcome conditions,
Hmm.
somebody can come to me with bad news, and I might talk about it, or I might be like, wow, I can't believe that person did that. But I don't assume it's bad. See, what God does is he gives you the elevator, and everybody's trying to fight for the stairs, right? And so if I can stay in the zone, I can stay in my peace and truth and be connected, then my world will begin to match that. And so we can debate all the fleshly things. We could talk about it, and I could say, I agree with you, a woman, that's 5'2" should be more open-minded, whatever. But when it really comes down to it, all of those things will lead to that same broken model of there has to be conditions in order for me to be happy. And so once you can get somebody to the point where they can be happy no matter what, then they can start going, oh, it was so fun. I met the coolest guy. Like everything he said was so interesting. That's where you begin attracting beyond the world, overcoming the world. And it really does work. I mean, have you ever seen just a guy that's just really funny? He's not good looking. He's not tall. He doesn't have, his outfit put together. He's not put
Hmm.
together, but he's hilarious and women love him. What does he have? In France, they say he has je ne sais quoi. It is that I don't know what it is, right? It's that thing, and we all can have that. But I do believe that the reason people have to have conditions is because they don't know who they are and they don't love themselves. If you do not love you, it makes it really difficult to love someone else. And so people need to start with themselves, do the work on the inside, and then have God bring you somebody, or, the universe or whatever. I mean, you don't have to be a Christian for these things to work. These are universal laws.
Mm-hmm. I think I've heard similar lines of thought before. I think that particular way of thinking, it sounds like the word that came up to me was enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are many things that have been placed into the current matrix that we're in that have kind of taken us more into that survivor frequency,
Mm-hmm.
where we're just kind of worried about surviving in general, and our lower animalistic instincts have kind of, on both sides, for males and females, have kind of been at that level for a very long time. Now, what that would look like at the highest vibration, I'd imagine it's something like what you said.
Yes. And it's true across the board for abundance, for health, for everything. We have only begun to learn about this. And that's why I'm trying to work with mothers and their children now, because I would like to see the next generation not have to fit a template or try to squeeze into a matrix, but instead create from outside of it without boundaries, and to see where they can go. I mean, imagine a kid that really knew who they were. And I'm talking about, I'll use your word, I'm talking about enlightened to the level that they understand the importance of humility. Because a lot of times, if you can have all the enlightenment in the world, but if you're still a narcissist, you're wielding a dangerous weapon. Or you can have all of the work you've done in the world, but you still can't control your tongue. You still have, work to do.
I've noticed that people. So I'll kind of go over a story and kind of paint the point. I've noticed that. So there was a lady. There was a girl my age. We were at a university. I went up to her and I was hitting on her, right? And I was like, "Hey, you're really attractive. What's your name? We should go out sometime." And she was like, "No, I don't want to, but you're very handsome and you're very nice and this and that, and you're very brave for coming up and talking to me."
Yeah, that is. I like it.
Generally speaking, whenever I did go out and talk to women and try to date them, it was I always had this thing in the back of my head, the meme where the guy's like, "Brace yourself." Because like a lot of women, I don't know, sometimes you either get like "Oh no, thank you," like, and then it's like, "Oh my god, okay, fine," but then you'll get the "Oh no, oh my god, I can't believe you just asked me out, that's awful," or you get like the daggers, with the eyes, or you'll get, I don't know, there's sometimes you'll get emasculated, sometimes you'll get ignored, like they'll pretend you weren't there and you didn't just say something and keep walking on. Mm-hmm. But this particular woman kind of captured my imagination and had my full attention, because I noticed that she did less than she had to in that situation. Mm-hmm. It compelled me to actually sit and talk to her, and we had a conversation about sandwiches. Like, it was like simple things, right? Were enjoyable. Like, but this was after getting rejected. So the rejection actually ended up feeling completely fine.
Right.
It was because of her energy. It was more feminine, but at the same time, like, it was like I had I had never really experienced something like that. So it was kind of like, wow, what's happening?
That's awesome. And that's a rejection. Imagine
Yeah.
the other way.
Yeah, but then what was interesting is that I had asked her because I had never really experienced it. I was like, there's no way you could be like this unless you went through something.
Yeah.
And she, because I was one of the guys who hit on basically any woman I thought was attractive enough. Like, I wouldn't say I was a player, um, but I was probably closest
Yeah.
thing to it. Um, so this particular woman, she said, "Yeah, my boyfriend, he actually ended his own life," and
That'll be sobering.
I was like, "Wow." Uh, but she kind of moved me throughout that conversation so much that I ended up finding her after the conversation and giving her a hug.
Aw.
But what was cool from that was that there were a lot of men and women I notice have bitter resentments towards the other side. Um, and that would also include me at that time to a certain degree. And a lot of those resentments kind of faded into nothingness. I recognize that a lot of times it kind of faded away whenever an interaction between the opposite sex looked something like that. And it was several times where it just kind of had this healing effect. Um, that's kind of one of the solutions. I was kind of
Yeah.
hinting at it, but that's kind of one of the solutions to the issue I presented in this.
Right. But you're also maturing because you're recognizing it. That same feminine, high, enlightened, kind rejection might not have felt the same when you weren't as mature.
Yeah.
So you had to at least be able to be aware of that, and that's part of your shift probably as well. Because we're always equally responsible for all of the things that we create. So anytime I have something bad happen, bad, I used to look for the cause outside of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now I look for the cause inside of myself.
Yeah, the
So,
external locus of control.
yeah.
That's a major. I remember on YouTube you were. I remember talking about something similar to that and how a lot of movements that are out nowadays they kind of they force people into an external locus of control, and it causes a lot of pain. Like
Yes.
The more uh, louder ones like feminism and of course you have like other Marxist derivatives and stuff like that. It kind of forces people to blame other people for things that they have full control over.
Or participation in. And
Yeah,
to me, a bystander's no different than a bully.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's pretty, and once you realize it, nothing really affects you at an emotional level, because you know how to process it. And that's the difference too, because when, let's say those people who are in a place where they're vulnerable to somebody, some Marxist or somebody taking the reins of their horse, they're not holding on to their reins because they're handing the reins over and saying, here's the reins to my horse, and then I'm going to be miserable depending on where you're going to take me on this horse, right? Instead of taking back control and realizing how much of this is me, how much of this movement is me, how much of this hell is me. And once you take the control, those reins back, you now have the power, right? You didn't have the power when you're giving it to the circumference, the things on the external.
Right.
And so for me, immediately I figure out, okay, it doesn't matter who it was. If I have an issue with them, that was 50% my fault. It's just the way I roll. And so I go, okay, what did I do to allow for that to sneak into my world? How did I not recognize the nefarious or dark energy that that person was giving off, or narcissistic energy, or whatever it was. And then I refine
Those
my
people are fun.
standards. Well, and that's part of why some people stay in it. They get a dopamine hit from the fight.
They're very charismatic people.
A lot of times, yes. A lot of times, yes. But then if you could see their energy, and the better you get at understanding the law of correspondence, the better you get at being able to read people's energy. And when you read someone's energy that has a very narcissistic, high on the spectrum energy, they're not so charismatic anymore, because you see it. It's like knowing the tricks. Like when you're little and you don't know the tricks behind, a movie. Wow, how did they do that? How did that person's magic? Like, oh, but once you've been a producer and we stop camera, we put somebody in, then we start camera again. Like, and so then the magic is gone. And so you're taking away that evil. Evil is got a lot of lures,
Mm-hmm.
and they have a lot of bait, and they have a lot of they're very organized. Evil's very organized.
I can see that they're way more organized than the good, especially now with what's going on.
Oh yeah, because the church is
The outer good, because we have the inner good, like white hats, and that's kind of. But most people don't know about that,
Right.
So I would say that good relies on a few good with quite a lot of resources, whereas
Right.
the bad is extremely well organized and extremely prolific.
Well, and it's predictable too, because when somebody's in the matrix full on, most of them are overworked and not happy with their lives. 72% of the people in corporate America aren't happy with their jobs. That's crazy. That's where they spend the lion's share of their time, and they're not happy. And
I would argue it's higher.
Yeah, and that's, I would too.
Intuition.
I think sometimes people get so used to being miserable, they don't know how miserable they are. But what happens is, because of that, there's predictors that they can make. They know people are going to get sick. They know they're going to want to get drunk. They know they're going to want to smoke. They know they're going to want to watch porn. And so all of these things are the ways that people soothe themselves from their own misery. Yeah. But those very things keep the spell on them, because all energy seeks expansion. And so no matter what you're into to soothe yourself, it's going to have to always be more and more and more and more and more and more and more, because that's how energy works. And that's why you have to decide what kind of energy you want.
That's okay. You're teaching me things. One of the things that males, I've noticed, one of our vices that tends to be differentiated from the female vice. And the reason I differentiate these things is to understand how systems work. So I've noticed males tend to have vices with pornography. Pornography tends to be a big issue with males because of a lot of things. Because it's so prolific, because it's so readily accessible, because of how the average male, the average millennial as well, how they structure their lifestyle. It tends to kind of seep in and create a lot of issues. I would say the female equivalent to that would probably be social media. So like TikTok and Facebook, things like that. Because you end up, just like the male is chasing for that next high, that next experience, the next sexual experience, the female, at least the younger ones, I don't necessarily know the effects it's having on older females, but I would say the younger females seem to be chasing validation. And that validation, like the sexual escapades, has no end.
No, exactly.
And I think that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah, and it is evil. It's not good validation. It's evil validation. And it will have you cutting yourself and poking yourself and starving yourself and doing all kinds of things that aren't healthy. One of the the things that I do a lot on my channel is I work with women out of sex trafficking, and I work with women out of satanic ritual abuse. And of course, recently had Madison Marquette on, who was in the porn industry for many years against her own will. And so I have gotten a really good education on porn. And one of the things that I think is unfortunate is that, one, guys don't know how they're destroying their own sex lives from doing it.
Yeah.
Because what happens is they get a thing that I have coined the name click dick, because it literally is, they have to click, 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 click. Like they can't even get an erection unless there's something coming all the time. So when they're in the presence of a regular woman and they're not connecting on a heart level, they're trying to get that fleshly click, and it's just not working. Yeah. And so that's the first part, is how really unhealthy it is for them. But then there's the side of, you know, any guy that I've ever talked to that participates in strip clubs and stuff like that, I always ask them, I go, do you think that these young women really want to be doing that? Oh yeah, they do. They make so much more money, and, you know, they have babies. They got to take care of them. So I'm doing a good thing. Well, that's their justification, because actually that isn't true. Most of those women don't want to be there. And the ones that are there that say that they want to be there have been so traumatized and so damaged in their life that they're often there under the guise of being somebody's girlfriend, when really they're kind of being pimped out. And then not to mention the fact that, from what Madison was saying, if you see a woman that's in a porn that is inappropriately laughing, or not inappropriately, but the timing is off, or she seems like she's dazed, yes, she probably is against her will. So you're participating as a bystander with somebody that's more foul than a bully. And so that's the other thing. I mean, I think we have to start being accountable, but that means that we each have to look at ourselves. But guess what? Just like anything, that energy is going to expand, and at some point it will put you on your knees, and you will have to make a choice on what kind of life you really want to have.
Yeah, so I've experienced it personally.
Yeah.
A lot of the things you're saying, I've experienced myself personally. Yeah. I've experienced the impotence. I've experienced a lot of those things. Yeah. And I've experienced the constant need for expansion. So, like, it's affecting more men than anyone can imagine.
Yeah.
It's affecting good men. It's affecting bad men. It's affecting every type of man. It's affecting the righteous man. It's affecting the man who's not so righteous. It's affecting the one who fights the dark side. It's affecting the one who doesn't fight
it. Embraces it.
So, I would say also there's a lot of traumas on both sides of the sexes that are kind of being traumas and needs are kind of being put on a string and used against the sexes, and have been for quite a long time. The porn industry, I think, kind of put it into overdrive, because, you know, now we have millennials who aren't getting married. They're not seeking to have a sacred union. They're not seeking to have a union with one person long term. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Like, there's a lot of reasons on, you know, with the economy, with the behaviors of both sides, and the incentives, the different incentives to get married long term. That is influencing how both sides are behaving. Right. Now, you said trauma in particular leads to the stripping. I think one of the things that leads to males using pornography partly is the difficulty of access to sex. Now, the best way, I guess the most righteous way you could interpret that is, okay, he is not able to get married with the person that he wants, or he's not, like, somehow there's a break in that. Now, I'm not saying that he's not at fault for that, but there's a lot of factors that are being controlled that are kind of allowing these industries to thrive off of trauma, and because males need sex. Like, most people would say no, they don't. It's like, but it's extremely important for males. I mean, they have like 8 to 15 times more testosterone than the average woman. So, I mean, that particular thing itself, like, that energy has to go somewhere. I mean, it's going to go towards, I mean, here's the things where it's going to go towards. It's going to go towards working. It's going to go towards, making a better life for himself, being competitive, things like that. It's going to go towards things that could be good. But then the other aspect of it is he's going to want to have sex with something, and namely a female. I mean, he could have sex with a fleshlight, but namely, he's likely gonna want to have sex with a significant other and someone who he wants to be intimate with.
Right.
Granted, we've kind of made it a little more cheap in the modern day.
Totally.
But there's a lot of factors that have caused that, and I kind of want to get into it, but I want to hear what you have to say about that first.
About which part? The energy being channeled?
I don't know. I said a lot.
Yeah.
I do this. You kind of go off of kind of just impromptu. I do the same thing as well.
Yeah.
I think our styles are very similar.
Yeah. And so the thing that popped out to me the most was just the channeling of sexual energy, because this is, there's a book called not the Science of Getting Rich, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And one of the chapters is all about transmutation of sexual energy and how some of the most successful men in the world had a muse, or, some woman that really inspired them, and made them drive to be all that they can be. And so if you can go to your computer and click, you just wasted all of your energy, your creative energy. Not to mention, we could get into a whole nother subject of people who have begun not only doing that, but preserving the minerals that are in men's fluids. Because what happens is there's actually ways to have an orgasm without an ejaculation. And there's a lot of younger men that are learning about it and understanding it. And these very things are going to probably keep them from aging as much. And so for guys to begin understanding that the way God made us, and you can't, the devil tries to imitate everything God does. And so if you think about it, all you're doing is, like, there's this high level, beautiful version of what male sexuality should look like. Mm-hmm. And then there's Satan's version. And every time you succumb to Satan's version, you're taking away from having the high level best. So that's like saying, I could have flown private, but I'm going to fly coach. And people don't know because they haven't experienced it, because it takes self-evolution to get to a place where you overcome and recognize the sickness. This is Thor. Yeah, we name all of our cats and dogs after superheroes.
I don't think guys like talking about those kind of things, because I'm working on those things myself.
Yeah,
and I recognize that energy, that fluid, it's extremely powerful. But then it does cause you to age. And it's funny because I feel like I was the kind of person who read the manuscript, and once I read,
so you had heard of this before. You've heard of it.
Yeah, I've heard about it before. Okay. I learned a
lot of guys haven't.
I learned a little later, and I was like, "What? I've been slowly aging myself. Like, what my body has to, like, it basically cuts off a lot of functions just to create how many hundreds of million? Really? So I create little life in me? That's
I actually believe that that's the true definition of fornication. Like, I think it's messing around, even if you are married, and not using it properly. Yeah.
Damn, you're gonna have a lot of guys.
Well, and I mean, you know what? That's the thing that I think is so beautiful about free will, is we get to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. I mean, we could try. And that gets back to all the reasons why we're so divided. Because let me tell you, the more enlightened you become, the more you realize that your life affects everyone's. And I don't just mean one family or one neighborhood. I mean everyone, the true butterfly effect. And we can bring it up. But usually, like even somebody that's been working with me for a long time, who have even gotten to the levels of where I would really start working with them on unity and embracing people as spiritual entities rather than as separate things like, you know, Marxist, Republican, white, black, religion, differences, whatever it is. There's what that is separation of, it allows for the very opposite of what will bring us true happiness. Because actually, some of the happiest people in the world are the givers and the contributors. I mean, at one point in time, the gentleman that started Salvation Army, the reason he was so successful in the beginning was because he talked all the homeless people into helping other people. Well, once they realized that they were in a place of helping other people, they got their power back. And it changed who they were. And so they began using new energy that had to expand. And next thing you know, they're off the streets. And so, you know, that's what happened. It's kind of like you starting your channel. It starts out small, but eventually it won't be small anymore.
That sounds really cool. Sounds good. Sounds good to me. I think there's some notable YouTubers who kind of exemplify what you're saying. Mr. Beast, very, you know, I don't see any bad intentions, but very giving. You have several different channels where they just go out and give and give and give and give and give. And he's, of course, you can kind of see with his channel, it's grown it's very large. I think where guys will be when pornography isn't so prolific, where that energy will go will look extremely good. Like it'll look extremely good for the rest of the world because
it'll be powerful.
Yeah.
It will be what God intended them to be. And here's the thing is I believe that we haven't even begun to tap into what we can do as humans.
No.
Especially because the last thing a human does is unite with other humans. They're too busy looking at how different they are, not realizing that it is the very diversity that God put there for a reason. There's one of the greatest documentaries I've ever seen called Biggest Little Farm. And the whole thing is set upon diversity and how if you have the proper amount of diversity, you have an ecosystem that is flawless. So you don't have pestilence, you don't have coyotes attacking, you don't have any of that stuff because the circle of life is handling itself.
I think I think that's really beautiful because with a lot of the issues between men and women seem to stem from not understanding the vast differences between men and women.
Yeah.
Which you would think that the vast differences would divide the two sexes, but I think it ends up polarizing the two sexes the most just based off of the differences.
Right. It is interesting. And what I would say about that is you get to a level of reading energy that it is beyond sex. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why there's all these people coming out with 100 different ways of saying what kind of sex they are. Because
I don't think that's right.
because really we are just light beings
Yeah.
in human suits, right? And when you start working with people based on their energy rather than on what they look like, you get different results. Because see, you can't fake good energy.
Yeah.
You can't, because the law of correspondence is always at work. And so that tells you, it's kind of, I call it the Sherlock Holmes law, where you can watch somebody or listen to every word they say, and you can learn a lot about them in a very short period of time. It
Yeah.
makes it difficult for me to date because my standards are so high that I recognize very quickly that somebody hasn't grown past attachments or hasn't grown past narcissism or hasn't grown, and I don't mean narcissistic like something that was a legitimate, therapeutic.
You're talking about like a serious
I'm
problem.
talking about somebody. Well, I'm talking about somebody that just has those tendencies, but not a full out narcissist. But people have to begin overcoming themselves. As long as you're aggravated with anything outside, you've got work to do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's beautiful. And like another example of amazing things that happen with diversity is there's this place in Hawaii, and it's called Pharmacy, but it's farm, like down on the farm with the cows and the chickens. So it's Pharmacy. And they are a huge herbal garden. And they provide all kinds of stuff. And somebody was visiting it, and they were on YouTube, and they were saying, wow, like I have this too, but I get this type of bug. And they're like, oh, well, that's impossible for us to do because we have so many different kinds of herbs that the bugs, certain bugs don't like one of them. And so the bugs stay away completely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is what we're missing in life, is appreciating the differences. Intellectual people only hang out with intellectuals, and jocks only hang out with jocks, and gamers only hang out with gamers. But
In high school, I hung out with the jocks. I hung out with the intellectuals. I hung out with anyone who would accept me. So,
but that's why you probably can jump around in a lot of different areas because of that. But I think it's really good. And whenever I did a project, I always tried to hire people who were handicapped, people who were old, people who I really liked to cover it all. I mean, I had the most amazing assistant who had cerebral palsy. We have since lost her, but I just had her stay at the house. I let her, stay in our guest room, and she was so cute. The only thing she couldn't do is before she got there, she's like, do you have stairs? And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, are you okay with me bumping down the stairs on my butt? And I'm like, sure. Because she just couldn't do it. But she was amazing. That girl would stay on the phone where most people would get up and move around and do stuff. And so it was actually an advantage that she had that difference.
mm-hmm. We're coming at the hour mark.
Yeah.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to make sure that our schedules are working good. So I was thinking in the next 30, 45 minutes, we could call it quits. Are you good with that?
Yeah, I actually have about 15 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
I wanted to make sure I covered some of what's going on in the outer stretches of things.
Okay.
But there's a couple of things I wanted to cover
Okay.
in particularly. Let's see. So I have sticky notes. On my sticky notes, one of the things that I've noticed between the sexes that is extremely simple, but seemingly elaborate, is that both of the sexes seem to have needs, seem to have a lot of different needs, and I think that the needs of the men and the needs of the women are we're not able to meet those needs currently in the United States. And how now I know we're speaking about enlightenment, but I like to think I like to meet people where they are,
Mm-hmm.
and I like to meet me. I'm not overly enlightened. I'm not a remote viewer. I'm not in I'm not in the highest form of what I am technically.
Mm-hmm.
But where I am now, I see that where we are now, I see that the needs that males have aren't being fully met, and the needs that women have aren't being fully met. And the sooner we can recognize what those needs are for the males and the females, that's when I think that's when I think things will kind of start to coalesce and come together. Um, what do you think?
So when I think about, like, if somebody were to come to me and say, I really would like to have, because people come to me with all different things. I would really like to have the most amazing relationship. And there's lots of things that we can do to help that.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the first things I'll do is I'll say, hey, why don't you write up a list of all of the things that you would like, and then take the list and put it in the order of priority. And I think oftentimes when you go to someone has needs, they're so undefined. That person doesn't even know what their true priority is. So
Yeah.
how in the heck are they going to match up with it? Because they never took the time to sit quietly and write down the things that they would like and to prioritize them. Because you'll find somebody like my cousin came to me and she was, saying, this is the problem with my relationship. This is the problem with my relationship listed. And I was like, okay, tell me the top 5 most important things in a relationship. And so she named them and I wrote them down. And I was like, those were all things that were in your top 2 and you don't have any of those. So you went out with a guy expecting him to fulfill your needs when you already in your head knew those are the top 2 important things. Why would you keep dating him? And so that's what happens is people don't know themselves. And the reason they don't know themselves is because it goes back to what I was saying earlier. And I know that it sounds like I'm repeating the same thing over and over again. But if you do not love yourself, you cannot know how you want someone else to love you. And that includes taking care of yourself. And that includes understanding what your own needs are, understanding what your favorite foods are, understanding what your favorite movies are, understanding yourself enough to find a compatible match. Because I think that you could say, oh, well, this is the kind of thing that I want. And usually, like you said, with guys, it might be looks or,
definitely looks. Yes.
Yeah. And so you find that girl and she looks great and you start dating her and investing in her. This is your energy. And then you find out that she isn't a good partner and you really want a partner, because there's some guys that just want to take care of a princess. But you found a princess when you wanted a partner. And there's a big difference between a princess and a partner. And I work with adults that have been married 10 years and they're mad they married the princess because the princess doesn't do anything. But they knew they married a princess. So why did they pick her? Because they didn't know themselves. It was cute. She was so cute. Everything she did was cute. Well, that's really wonderful, but she's not a partner. And you want a partner. You don't want a doll, And so you have to know what kind of person it is that you want.
Yeah. I think a lot of guys kind of run into that trap. We tend to fall into I need to find the super pretty chick who's not really going to add anything, who's not going to support you in anything, who doesn't really have a little bit of her own thing as well. She kind of relies. I think a lot of guys fall into that trap. Now, the side I wanted to say, so one of the things I noticed. Hold on, my dog's begging me.
No worries. I'll comment on that. So this is really fun for me because I'll work with a client that I have really great rapport with, who's absolutely an alpha male. And I'll say to him, oh, your wife's the alpha. And they'll be like, what are you talking about? No. Well, this girl runs you into the ground. She does no work. She has a nanny. She doesn't do anything to contribute to society. And she's telling you what to do. Who's the alpha?
Oh shit.
And so it's kind of interesting because they sneak up on you. They look like cute little princesses, but they're actually takers, and they haven't developed because they grew up in families that probably enabled them and treated them and did everything for them, so they don't know how to do anything.
My mentor would say that those kind of women, he says he calls them the Diana complex. Partly, it's a slightly different. So those are the kind of women I would say that would drain a guy and would end up, emasculating him, which that gets in the way worse stuff. But um, in a way, feminism that um, that had a lot that created a lot of that, and a lot of women nowadays, that particular movement kind of created that less cooperative, more competitive energy.
Yes.
Which I don't think the sexes were designed to compete with each other.
I don't either.
And everything about us energetically and everything about us in our makeup would suggest that we were designed to thrive with each other.
Yes.
Movements like the feminist movement, like if you go back and look at some of the people who were heading up those movements, Kate Millett, for example, and her sister now, who's kind of making up for lost time and touring the country and saying, yeah, my sister was actually crazy. So, those women and gender studies things that you guys have in college, all that was designed to destroy the family. It was designed to make women hate men. It was designed, like, the entire movement seems to be wrapped around the idea of female superiority to men, but then it uses that as a way of, like, it kind of like it's weird because it, like, goes under the guise of equality, which is another thing. But
yeah, I mean, they're all lovely words, and I think that gets back to that Satan's trick, that devil's trick, that it's always the knockoff. It's never what really will work. So we're going to break up the family and we're going to destroy what the family can do, but we'll have gangs. We'll have gangs that you can be a part of, and we'll kick ass. And so I believe that God is not competitive. I believe that God is creative. And I think that God wants us to be creators and not competitive. Like, it doesn't mean you don't, like, see something and want to get better, but not to crush someone. And I think there's this crushing, like, I win kind of attitude, instead of like, hey, you like to do this, I like to do that. It's not either or. It's like, let's find a creative bridge where we both win, and we both literally win. Neither one of us is sacrificing. Because as soon as you find yourself sacrificing in any relationship, even in business, you will resent. And when you resent, you begin stress. And when you begin stress, then you start messing with the whole thing. And that's where you start with soothing yourself and doing drugs or, whatever the thing is.
There's so much I wanted to cover in this.
Yeah, I'll come back. I'll come visit you again.
Yeah, that would be great. I guess I wanted to have the last things I wanted to talk about was just kind of what's going on in the world. Now, my particular channel, I focus on gender relations and sex relations.
Oh, okay. I didn't even realize that.
That's a lot of what I talk about. I sometimes talk about what's going on the outside a little bit, except I don't want to get kicked off of YouTube. I can't go too far into it, but I've heard. So before I go into that, I wanted to say that with the Black community in particular, we were kind of the beta test for feminism in the 60s. A lot of what the dark ones, I'll call them, were trying to do, they kind of use our communities. I mean, with our particular men and our, the incarceration of Black men during the 60s, I guess, on through the 90s. the gangs that were established as well with the Bloods and Crips, which has their roots in a lot of the higher power, the higher families that are kind of wreaking havoc right now. um, we were kind of the beta test for what's currently happening in the United States, and just watching it, as a young millennial and watching and realizing that we were the beta test, that's where I was kind of like, wow, guys, don't go in that direction. It's really bad.
Not a good one. Not a good
No,
one.
yeah, because the men aren't happy and the women aren't happy in our particular community, and we're still picking up the pieces for
Yeah.
a lot of that stuff that's going on.
There's so many that are looking for answers, though, and I do have faith in humanity, unlike most people. I have seen, I don't know if you're aware, but I used to have a charity where I was working with guys out of jail, and
Yeah,
it was youth prison.
yeah, I wanted to
And
ask you about that because I know
yeah,
you're
it was
familiar
so
with it.
fun. I learned so much. Oh my gosh. I really understand so much more. And so I can look at things and understand it, because I think this is where we're missing. If we don't understand each other's vernacular, or we don't understand each other's ways, it's going to be hard to communicate. And so that's why it's important that we spend time crossing different boundaries. But it was such a great experience, and people would say, "Oh, it's so wonderful of you to give them a second chance." And I was like, I mean, these guys didn't even have a first chance. They didn't have dads. They didn't have moms. There was,
Yeah,
you know,
and extremely important for guys to have a dad, because that
yeah,
masculine model, if he doesn't have that, basically he's gonna grow up extremely chaotic. He's not gonna know how to be a man. Like, I've noticed a lot of truthers, they complain. They're like, come on, guys, man up, be strong. But it's like a lot
we
of
don't know
those,
what that is, right?
a lot of those guys. I mean, you have the dark ones. They basically have full spectrum dominance over the sexes. Putting stuff in foods, breaking up
Water,
families.
air, yeah,
Yeah, like single motherhood, like that system itself, like that basically puts masculinity at heel,
yeah,
like in the younger boys, and it's extremely. Now you do have moms. I will give
yeah,
credit to the single moms who know
yeah,
that certain things have to be, and they'll actually take their sons and they'll go give them to male mentors.
right.
Um, now, I think that those particular children who end up having that have an edge
Yes,
over the children who are just raised by mothers, because I love my mother to death, but I'm witness that when guys are raised by mothers, like it's a very delicate process, and
mhm.
it can also be very emasculating, even if the mother's not trying to be emasculating,
Absolutely, absolutely.
even if she's a good mom.
Yep, yep. I agree. And that's what happened to one of the guys that I work with. There was 14 of them in particular that I had hands-on, work with, and one of them was a Hispanic kid from Houston, and he had the greatest mom. She was amazing. Dad totally gone. If he showed up, he came to take stuff and leave. It was kind of a really bad situation. But the mom worked 3 jobs. So she was working so hard that she was never home, even
Mhm.
though when she was there, she was a great presence and she had high standards, but she couldn't monitor him. So he was off the radar. So yeah, it really, family is so important.
I've
And it
noticed I've noticed the moms try to be strong for their boys, but then when they're trying to be strong, they tend to not be emotionally available for them, and it
Yeah,
causes issues. Like, I can only say technically with my experience that
right.
that was the case, that my mom was trying to be strong for me in light
Hmm.
of how bad things were.
Hmm.
Um, Granted, we were all in that foxhole. It's like, damn, mama, you were fighting, and
Yeah.
my dad wasn't
You
in the
witnessed it.
foxhole. So if he came back after the war, it's like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, we just had bombs, all kinds of crazy things, and we were screaming and shooting. Moms try to be tough,
Yeah.
and they think that that's going to make the boy tough, but it just ends up doing the exact opposite, which is, to a lot of women, is like, wow, really? It's like, yeah, because it's energy. You're in the masculine. So he kind of like takes on the opposite energy because you're
Yeah.
taking on the energy that his father would take on. It's
Mhm.
really, it's
Well,
really
what's really good
important.
about it, though, is that there's ways to, like, no matter who I work with, and I've worked with people that didn't have, any anyone watching them. You can teach them, if they're open, all of the different masculine traits and all of the different feminine traits, and they can round themselves out. Each person, I suggest all my clients do that, even ones that grew up with great families, because usually you'll tend to be more masculine or feminine. And so you can round yourself out and allow for more beautiful things to come into your life, because there's a lot of women that can't focus and don't have that drive, but they could adopt those things. And same with, somebody that's more masculine, they can get better communication skills. They can start learning that you can do things through community. And
Mhm.
so there's this beautiful way of rounding it out. And it's so simple. I mean, you just go pull off any chart that shows you masculine and feminine traits off of, any server, any Google, whatever, and just check them off, see which ones you do and which ones you don't, and you can add to it. But the reason that humanity is in this situation is because we are also lost. If each person was in their own power
I
and
was going to
authority,
say accountability.
yeah, I mean, if we all had our own power and authority, then we wouldn't be seeking to control someone else on the outside to fix what our problems are, or we wouldn't succumb to greed in a situation, because our principles would have already been tested and we would have stood for them, and we wouldn't have punked out, so to speak. And so this is the process that each person goes through individually, regardless of where you came from. It doesn't matter. I've seen very, very wealthy kids that were in worse situation than the people who came out of jail, because the kids out of jail at least believed in God. Some of
Mhm.
these people that were very, very wealthy didn't believe in God, and they weren't connected, and they had no spiritual life at all. And so there was nothing to go on other than what they saw in the flesh. That's a tough life. If
Yeah.
you had to live without your spirituality,
It's hard to live if you don't have anything worth fighting for.
yeah. And so to be able to see beyond what's here in the material realm, I think, is what I just think. God's never made a mistake, and he's not making mistakes right now. So why not smile and say, okay, what's my lesson today, God? And just take it, because
Oh,
as
smile a little bit.
long as you resist, it's going to get worse and worse until you learn that lesson. Once you learn the lesson, you don't have to learn it again,
Absolutely.
or at least not at that level.
Do we have a moment to talk about what's going on? Just kind of banter
I
back and
have a
forth.
4:30 and I need to prep for it. So I probably have like 2 more minutes left.
Okay, tell you what, let's you said we could do another one. Let's plan for another event when you're open the next time.
Okay.
And then we can probably do a part two, just, and I won't add a topic. We'll just kind of, that one will be just kind of pure,
Okay.
this particular round.
Okay.
So everybody who's been on, this has been the Iron Sun with Carmen Studer, and we're just having a general conversation. Granted, you can see there's 0 people in here.
Hey, that's how it starts out.
I really am a very small channel, but
Yeah. Well, my daughter and I have the Let Me Ask My Mom one, and we have 2,000 on that one, and we still only get anywhere from 3 to 10 people on our lives. I get a little bit more now on mine, so
your channel's pretty big.
it just takes a little while to get there. So you just have to keep on plugging, and it helps too to just keep working from that spiritual space, because God can promote you in ways that you can't even imagine. I never thought that, like, half the people that would be on mine did, and it, of course, it bumps the numbers up every time somebody comes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on, Carmen.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, and I'll see you
Great combo.
soon. All right.
Absolutely.
Bye.
So, just wanted to say there's going to be a couple of topics I'm going to cover. But I don't have a plan. I don't have any plans on making like a lot of content over and over and over in the future, day after day after day. Just to let you know, anyone who watches this video, I didn't cover everything I wanted, but hopefully I can cover more in part two. For anyone who listens to this, enjoy.